Hey, it's Bridgette Dolgoff and Karen Stone's Digging Holes weekly online class. And we're not going to be able to see the other collaborator, but I do have another collaborator today. She's going to be discussing, we're going to be discussing some topics relating to common law, and some of it segues into natural law, and, we've got some ideas. So can kind of help to start educating people on this topic. All right, so the first part of the topic and also my collaborator today is Kathrine Hine. Do you want to give people like your email and stuff like that? Yeah.
Okay, it's K as in Kathrine, Shine, that's S-H-I-N-E, K Shine, at WLJAradio.net. You can remember the letters. It stands for With Liberty and Justice for All, back when we were starry-eyed and visionary. Yeah.
That way, if people want to get in touch with you for any reason, that they can have that information. We'll give it again. And when I do the blog, the after class blog, it'll have a whole bunch of links, and you'll be able to find that blog on coe-llc.com. And that'll have links that go along with more information. Kathrine's going to give me a few more videos, some older videos on people speaking about common law. So we're going to have those up on the blog, the after blog, so that way people can go down the rabbit hole. So you were going to start the topic on how to stop being a victim.
Yeah. I think it's sort of victim thinking is what I call it, kind of infiltrates how you approach learning anything or solving any problem. And that's why I thought to talk about that first before we really got into the common law itself, because it's kind of a novel concept for people who believe that the only law there is out there is what's at your county courthouse or your city courthouse. I ran into the problem of victim thinking. I represented a lot of battered women in my practice of law, which, I did from about 1977 to I resigned last year. And but I wasn't really considered active for the last 10 years, 12 years, whatever. But what I found is that victim thinking interferes with our ability to really look at the cold, hard facts and draw conclusions that are based on reality instead of our state of crisis. And I found that when we've been abused, and I think we all have been abused, we're all in a position with this so-called government that has its boot on our neck. We're all in the position of being abuse victims. Not all of us are survivors, but I found that the thinking is often to attribute more power to the abuser than the abuser in fact has. I would hear women tell me that, their abuser, who might be, work in a butcher shop, let's say, to her, in her eyes, he was one of the more powerful men in the whole county, and which really defied my ability to believe that. And little by little, I hoped to get her blinders off so that she could see, his power was pretty relative compared to a whole lot of other people's power. And without, if you go into something defeated before you start, it really makes it difficult to understand. And I don't say that from any superior point of view at all, because I've been subject to it myself, and not that infrequently. Right now, what we're all facing is the reality. Some of us knew about this earlier than others, and some like to lord it over those who didn't wake up until later than they did. But however you do, and I think this latest medical siege that they attribute to this so-called coronavirus is just the occasion for understanding that, you know what, and it's come upon us so suddenly that more of us are suddenly able to realize this doesn't make sense. What they're telling us today, sometimes in the same announcement, is internally inconsistent. You know, like when Trump initially announced that, oh, it's no big deal, you know, you'll probably get over it in a couple of weeks, but we're going to shut the freaking country down because of it. There's a disconnect there, you know. These two things cannot coexist in reality. And people would, you know, stuff that information and just believe the surface representations that it'll all be over in a couple of weeks, except it's not all over in a couple of weeks. And then more of us are waking up to the reality that this cannot possibly be what we're experiencing today, the restrictions on our movements and our economy cannot be for the reasons stated. So there's another agenda, and it's really not a big mystery. They've told us, hidden in plain view, many times, what the agenda is, and you know that's what people know as Agenda 21. Not the most readable document in the world, and I don't lay claim to knowing what the whys and the wherefores are in it. If you want further information on just what is coming up next and what all the plans are, there's no better source, I don't think, than Deborah Tavares. Stop the Crime. I think it's stopthecrime.com. She's got a ton of YouTube videos on there, and she's talked about everything from what we figure will be one of the next major attacks on our liberty, forced vaccination. And she's talked about that extensively, among other things. A lot of people, even in the liberty movement, have attacked her as being too much of a doom and gloom person. But she does a lot of just reading straight out of Agenda 21, and you know, that's where they tell you. Another document is the Zion Elders document. I forget exactly how it's called, but it's it details kind of the psychological warfare that we're undergoing. There's a good documentary also called Psy Wars, and I'll send you a link to that. And it tells you how the entertainment and so-called news centers have crafted the way we're supposed to be thinking about our so-called government.
So I have a question. I mean, it was something that I didn't get to ask you when I had you on the radio show, but it's probably, you know, important now. What happened, you know, because you woke up, right, and you decided, you know, to get out of the law you were doing, and then you moved into kind of more of the legal end that you're doing now.
Common law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, common law. So what happened, you know, to kind of, you know, tell people and me about what happened, like how you kind of woke up, you know, maybe what that big turning point was that you saw, that you were kind of like, I mean, did you know at any point in time what the bar was until you woke up?
I really didn't. I knew that what I thought I knew was that this is about corruption. This is about extreme corruption. But I was aware in the mid-1990s that there seemed to be a very strangely coincidental relationship between the child sexual abuse cases I was trying in front of county so-called judges, and their reluctance, extreme reluctance, let's put it that way, to protect children. And even when there was medical evidence, even when the child was old enough to give testimony, even, you know, there are actually a lot of other indicators. Sometimes there's even eyewitnesses to the abuse. And none of that relatively objective as you're going to get, evidence of child sexual abuse was deemed enough to protect the child. Now, it always struck me as odd that, you know, if this had been a criminal prosecution where somebody was going to go to the penitentiary, then the evidence we just presented in this civil matter would have been more than enough to take to a jury to have voted on sending him away for a very long time. But in the civil context, where the burden of proof was supposedly much less, it was not enough. Again, a disconnect. Just doesn't make sense. I began to question, are these people sitting in their black robes actually pedophiles or pedophile defenders? Because they sure behaved that way. And it was, that was going on, you know, in Oklahoma. That's when I first woke up, when I was practicing in the mid-90s. Am I still on? Okay.
Yep,
right.
You're still on. You're still good. Okay. Yeah.
So
that was the first waking up point where you started to kind of like go, what's going on here?
Yeah, and it got worse and worse, more and more intense, and other people would corroborate what I was observing. And I observed the same thing even more intensely when I relocated from my Oklahoma practice to my Ohio practice in 1996. And I mean, there were just little clues along the way, but I just chalked them up as, yeah, more corruption. And then in the around about 2015, I started doing a radio broadcast myself. One of the broadcasts I did was Who Judges the Judges? And I interviewed people from the Fully Informed Jury Association organization, and just anybody with a different opinion about what was going on in law at that time, 2015, 16, 17. And I got some people from a group in Columbus, Ohio, that was meeting at the time, a common law study group. And I don't know whether they had assembled some sort of a common law court. They have since disbanded. Anyway, and I can get into more about why that group, as well as other common law study groups, tend to get into trouble. But anyway, they were explaining to me, or trying to explain to my audience when I interview them, some of our real history, and it all seemed very bizarre to me, and I figured it would sound pretty bizarre to my audience too. And I don't know that the people explaining what they were doing were kind of entranced with using their newfound vocabulary, and that was very much an impediment to understanding. So it troubled me for a long time, but I still went along, you know, with saying, well, this is about corruption, and these people, I don't know if they're crackpots, not crackpots, whatever, but they have a point of view, and I wanted to put it out there. And then I was talking to one of the people on the broadcast about the common law court in Ohio, and she told me, we were just talking back and forth, and she said, you know, what'll really blow your mind is take your court, you know, your local county court, start picking some of the phone numbers that you would use for the clerk's office, the judge's chambers, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the easiest way she knew of to get into the Dun & Bradstreet website. Now, I understand Dun & Bradstreet having a record at Dun and Bradstreet is not proof positive of having of being a corporation. But she says you will see your court listed there. And I thought, yeah, right. So I went in there. Sure enough, it was there. It had a Dun and Bradstreet number. It was a commercial enterprise of some kind. And then, you know, I learned more after that. There are people who still want to argue with you that, notwithstanding all the evidence, that that your local school board, your city, your local court.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's fear because they can't go there, you know, because if it's found to be fact, they're not going to be able to cope. You know, I had a friend of mine who blocked me on Facebook recently, who's really smart, aware, has followed a lot of the same information that I have, who has friends on her Facebook page that were actually literally, as she was posting stuff, you know, and trying to educate them over the last couple of years, that literally two of her really close friends ended up in the hospital for like full on nervous breakdowns. And one of them, you know, had been months and hadn't really come out of it. And then that they were just looking at a little bit of the information. But I think a lot of it, they want to argue with you because of a lot of it's a fear. A lot of it is a fear, scared that it may be true.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, once you well, there's levels of accepting the truth, and you know, it's just like peeling or unpeeling the levels of an onion, and you get more and more awareness, and it is, as you start seeing what this elaborate construct that's been around since the 19th century or earlier. It didn't get into full swing, of course, until around about 1912, and that's when Ohio's Constitution was amended, and probably a lot of states' constitutions were amended. But it had started before that, and I don't know, you know, all the details. There's a lot of people out there online who made it their business to understand exactly what happened when the Southern senators walked out of the U.S. Congress in 1861, I think, and that they didn't have a forum, and that really any legislation enacted after that was therefore unauthorized. Other people, you know, draw other conclusions from this. But the bottom line is we haven't even been allowed to discuss these facts. A good bit of that I don't see talked about is our education system is increasingly dumbed down. A woman by the name of Charlotte Iserbyt, who was the education secretary under Ronald Reagan, wrote a book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And that was, of course, intentional. And then to add to that, the publisher of school textbooks, Macmillan Company, is a Rothschild-controlled corporation. So what does that tell you about what we learned in school? We get a certain angle.
None of it's true. I mean, everything. Right. So what happened? You know, I'm just kind of like pulling this out to help other people who are new to this kind of thing or, you know, experience. Yeah, you're a lot like me. You know, when I find out something's not right, I immediately stop participating, and then I have to regroup and figure out, you know, what my life is going to look like or how I'm going to move forward from that point on. But what happened kind of when you discovered that you were involved in an organization called the Bar? And I also want people to understand that attorneys, just like doctors, don't know for the most part what they're involved in. You know, right. A lot of the people that work for these organizations don't know because you went to a school that taught you this and never told you the other parts. And so, you know, they get you to do their, you know, dirty work so to speak. And medical are just as bad as the bar or
Absolutely.
judges. The medical field is actually worse. Doctors are huge criminals, whether they know it or not. So what happened when you started kind of, what were the first things that you started to notice? And that, how are you confronted by finding out about what the bar was? And then what were your steps? Because this is the part of not being a victim anymore. What were the steps that you took to get yourself out from being victimized by the system?
Well, I don't know if the system itself acknowledges what I did as effective, but I consider it effective, and I consider I'm the authority on that. I wrote a letter resigning, and delivered it certified to the so-called Chief Justice of the so-called Ohio Supreme Court. I got a response back saying, "Oh, you should have put it in an affidavit form. Should have done this. Should have." I don't care. I communicated the information. She got it, and my concern was, and I posted. I recorded it in a number of public places. I didn't get to that point until July 4th, 2019, because I was laboring all those years including mostly the years that I thought this was only about corruption, under the illusion that I can achieve more justice from within the system. I can change the system from within. See, I can beat them at their own game. And so every time I hear someone telling me that, particularly non-lawyers, or lawyers, either one, I can beat them at their own game. Yeah, really? Well, I found out a lot about that when my vaccine injured son was locked up in an Ohio psych facility in 2009, and I was determined to get him out. And I pulled out all the stops. I did nothing but eat, sleep, and breathe psychiatry and the law, and used bar attorneys. I used whatever was available. We ended up having about 2-3-day hearings. I worked as a paralegal for some of the attorneys, and researched everything there was, I think, to know about the issue. And every which way, you slice it, under their rules, under the statutes and codes, and the Constitution, everything they were doing was illegal. It was all illegal, and they had no evidence. The standards were unconstitutionally vague. Their experts weren't really experts. Their expert treatises had, for example, every time somebody's diagnosed with any form of mental illness, which is a common, political weapon to accuse someone of, whenever that happens, they're supposed to rule out organic medical conditions that might explain somebody's distress, somebody's mental confusion, whatever. And they consistently fail to rule out that, even though their own diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, which I call Diagnose Something for Money, that manual gives specific a specific precondition that before you diagnose anybody with anything, you got to rule out all of the organic causes, all biochemical causes. And they never do that. They never even attempt to do that. And somehow, they just, through some sort of sleight of hand, every single humongous, insurmountable obstacle to keeping my son locked up, in their mind, they overcame or ignored. Usually they just ignore stuff. In their minds, I guess, if they ignore it, it doesn't exist. And we went up into appeal courts in their system, found so-called courts, appeal court judges were changing facts from the record. First time on appeal, new facts. I had never seen that before. But I noticed that in the last 5 years or so, things have gotten dramatically worse. There's hardly even any pretension in the so-called courts that it's anything other than a free-for-all. It's just a free-for-all. It's result-oriented, and that's all. They cherry pick what they want to support the conclusion they've already decided they're going to reach. So I'm sorry, I'm digressing maybe from your question. Are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here. Well, I was just, what happened, I mean, so, you know, for on your end of it, right, to get out of kind of, regardless if the system picked it up or not, right? When you found out that you were involved, you were in a contract with the bar, basically, and you found out about what the bar was,
Yeah.
and then you actively moved to, you know, not participating with them anymore. So that kind of like that little section would be great.
You know, what I was actually thinking was, because I was continuing to think, I still got to, you know, fight the system from within, you know, with my knowledge. But then I started thinking about, well, what about all these lawyers and judges and social workers and psychiatrists and police officers and all these people who are participating in statutory as well as common law crimes. Well, in the statute world, it's statutory infractions and common law crimes. And I want to devote more of my energy to focusing on those minions. But eventually I had to say, well, what about me? What about me as a minion? And this is what I want to address to people who are minions, who are already working in the system, who seem to think they're going to be protected for their participation in these crimes by saying I was just following orders, it was just my job, that sort of thing. Not a defense. Sorry, not a defense. I mean, I knew that, and then I started applying it to myself. You know what? And I've read a lot of books about the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust. And I was aware that in the aftermath, a lot of the people would get it wrong, who was really a Nazi and who really was not a Nazi. And I decided I want there to be no freaking mistake about that I was not a Nazi. All right. At least not knowingly. So, you know, I have a lot of amends to make. I mean, I not that I ever intentionally harmed anyone when I was practicing law, although there was one brutal cross-examination I did a couple of decades ago I'm not proud of. But I want to make it really clear, those aren't my people. I want to dissociate myself very clearly, very unequivocally from their midst. And I can't claim to understand all the contracts and inner workings and history of the original bar guilds from England and the ways in which the members of the organized bar are unregistered foreign agents under the system's own statutes. I am aware of the original 13th Amendment, which I cited in my letter of resignation, that anyone with a title of nobility like Esquire, I never used that myself, but anyone who has that is presumed to be unfit for a position of public trust. So I think, and I don't know why we aren't focusing more effort on removing those people from positions in Congress, in our state legislatures, out of their black robes, you know. So I wanted to be a part of that, and never assume that just because I learned something in law school made it true. You know, a lot of things we think we learned and are axiomatic really aren't.
And
So,
that's the key to like not being a victim too. You know, like I tell people, I've gotten a lot of persecution from people that I know because I've made the decisions that I've made because they think I've lost my mind, you know, on some level. But you know, in the end, it's you that has to have integrity, and it's you that has to release yourself from the situation, right? It's you that has to educate yourself and be open and take in more information, even if it goes against everything that you believe in, because it's really the only way that you can stop the victimization, is to, you know, take charge of your own life, your own energy, your own being,
right.
and make choices accordingly. Okay, so the second topic, I'm going to keep you on track.
Okay.
Okay, the second topic is importance of using the English language correctly in light of its bastardization over the past centuries. So give us some stuff on that. What
Well,
your thoughts were.
first of at one level, I want to point out to people, if you're going to achieve anything, you're going to have to be able to master the English language and spelling if you're in a written form of communication. And sadly, most of us, many of us, did not achieve very much in our formalized education. You know, we don't understand about verb tenses and spelling, and English is a tricky language. But as soon as you start making errors like that, you're going to be discounted. You know, you're going to be trivialized, and I see that too much. I mean, my kind of editorial eye, you know, I pick up on that right away, and as soon as I see that, I know that the person probably isn't a lawyer, didn't get the training, and just doesn't seem to understand just communicating simple facts. I found when I talk to people about what their situations are, how can I help you? And they're unable to explain their situation, their own situation, in any kind of chronological order. They tend to use, well, he did this and she said that and they did. Who do you mean by they? And they make assumptions that I know who they are. I don't know. You just called me. How am I going to know? Think things through. Think of your audience. What do they know and not know? And present things in a logical way. Plan what your communication is going to be, or what's the point of attempting to communicate. So that's one level of mastering the English language. You have to be able to simply communicate well enough so that you can communicate what your problem is to someone who might be able to help you. And if they have to do a whole lot of work to figure out what in the heck is she talking about, you know, you're not going to be doing yourself a service. Now, that said, I know a lot of really, really intelligent people who can barely, and there's one individual in particular who does very helpful broadcasts. I find them helpful. And he can barely read out loud, okay? He's getting a lot better. and I am just moved by the degree to which he has educated himself, because I think he probably came from, you know, a situation where he was not able to communicate very well at all. But he's intelligent. He's got the native intelligence. So he's educated himself. He has been reading, you know, books that I haven't, you know, gotten through myself. The Law of Nations, Wigmore, Blackstone, and he's reading that stuff. And probably not because he wants to, but he knows his life depends on it. So he's doing it, and he's getting through. And his outside his his out loud reading is getting a lot better in the process. So I think that kind of comes with the territory. The more you read, the better you get at spelling. The more you read, the more you listen to other people who are educated, the better you are at communicating your own thoughts.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, I laugh. I had by the time I I dropped out, I left school. I had to kind of leave my parents, when I was like around 16. And I ended up going to night school to actually work on my GED. So I moved to Reno, which is a bigger town, and they had night school. At a couple of the local high schools, they had a night school program that they had teachers teaching. So when I went in to start learning, it turned out I had a 6th grade reading level. And I was a sophomore in a high school, in a one horse town.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of this person really helping me with education. Now it's funny because, say, I'll post a blog or information from somebody else onto my blog or my website or something. And then, I have to actually go through and edit what they wrote. And I'm super blown away that these are like doctors or researchers and legal people, people that are supposed to be at the top of the chain as far as education. And here I am editing their writings, or whatever it is, their blog. And it blows me away, like how, you put a comma in the wrong place, you put and in the wrong place, you do a lot of things, and it can really change what your statement or your sentence means completely, 100%.
Well, there's an I would consider that more like maybe, I don't know, nitpicky, but I'm just talking about like gross errors. Like, for example, and I was surprised to find this, and I think it's found in one of the documents that's online for the new California, the new state of California, or the new California state, something like that. And their documents are really well done. I'll just say that at the beginning. But I was reading through part of it, and they were talking about what they meant to say was the tenets of our republic, or something like that. But what the word was, the tenants, like landlord tenant, the tenants of our
Yeah.
republic.
Yeah, no, I see that stuff all the time. Like the misspelling of Y-O-U-R, or, Y-O-U apostrophe R-E.
Yes.
You see that a lot. And, with this texting culture, the further dumbing down of people, it's, I hate to say that I'm becoming like an old fuddy, because I don't understand. Like, I'll even be on like a Zoom meeting and people will be typing on the side, communicating with each other. And the stuff that the younger people and what they're typing, I have no idea. It's like a whole other language. I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, I just don't even on Facebook, sometimes people will like make a statement or referral, and I have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
And so this further takes you away from being able to understand anything from the medical people, from the legal people. Like, you don't understand the language that they're using. You could look at your documents and this is a thing that I do, is I get a lot of people online appointments to try to help to get them off pharmaceutical drugs, because I've been an osteopath for 30 years, nutritionalist, So, I use herbs and all kinds of different things to get them off, and other, health related stuff. And I'm always so shocked that they don't understand what their diagnosis is. And the other problem is they don't understand how their diagnosis was achieved, right? They don't understand, the medications and all of these things, because when they have to go and read about it, the language is so over their head, right? In a different kind of format. And then they don't realize, like, in medical, you could be using the same word that's in law or chemistry or across the board, But in medicine, it has a little bit different definition that they're using. And so you have to go to the medical dictionary to actually define, what's being said. So sometimes just educating people on, helping them to just understand like the basics. I'm sure that's kind of like when you're dealing with legal stuff, that's kind of how it is too, because they don't, it's really difficult for them to, wrap their minds around that they've been taught something different. Because the Merriam, definition dictionary is what they give to the peasants or the public. That's not what each person, when they go to college, they get a different dictionary. They get a law dictionary, they get a medical dictionary, they get a philosophy dictionary. They get everybody, all these different professions. Geologists get a geologist dictionary. And so the same word that you're looking in the Merriam dictionary is not the same, could be the same word that's being used in a document or medical or whatever else, but it doesn't mean the same thing.
Right. But I was going to say too, if you're not communicating in standard American English in a document, and you're wanting to use that document to vindicate your lawful rights, first of all, I would tell you, don't submit that to a fake corporate court ever, no matter how perfect the document is. But ultimately it's going to be seen by somebody maybe who knows what they're doing. And if you have the slightest error in that, there are people still out there who are going to see that, and they will discount everything you say as words from someone who's ignorant. If you don't even know how to spell whatever, then obviously you haven't done your research about anything else, and we can just throw this aside. It causes instant disrespect, let's put it that way. But when you communicate about people's pharmaceutical use, for example, another impediment besides the poor education is many people in the United States are taking psychotropic pharmaceuticals. So that also interferes with learning, with ability to communicate. But I wanted to get into the other English, even for those who speak good standard American English and can communicate in writing. They're not going to be able to, which was my position in 2015. They're not going to be able to navigate their way through the fake corporate legal system, and a lot of that is because the statutes that they have are not properly drawn up. I'm going to just quote a little paragraph from former attorney Melvin Stamper's book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree. And I have that in PDF. If anybody wants to send me an email, I can send you the whole book. The laws of English grammar are totally inflexible. It is absolutely impossible for any English-speaking nation that prides itself on the assertion that it is a nation of law and not of men, without adhering to a strict discipline in the use of the English language and grammar, to be anything other than a nation of men without law. Proper English is essential to the drafting of those national laws, otherwise tyranny will always be the end result. And I didn't think too much of that at the time. I speak a couple of other languages, and I've noticed that English has as its nature that our vocabulary is not as extensive as in other languages, but other languages have more subtleties in their vocabulary than we do, and we have words that mean all kinds of different things, depends on the context, much more so than other languages do. So yeah, that's a big problem. And to help reduce that, one of the things I do in my common law notices is I start out, there's a whole paragraph devoted to the language that will be used in this document. The language that will be used in this document basically are as understood by the claimant and as is considered normal American English and according to Webster's dictionary. There are times that I deviate from that if I'm going to refer to Black's Law Dictionary, and some people prefer Bouvier's dictionary. And I'm not real familiar with that one. I believe if you're going to use Black's Law Dictionary, you don't want to use it beyond the 4th edition. They started dumbing it down after that.
Well, yeah. And you know, the other thing too about that it is used a lot, I actually use it, but it's actually Black's Law Dictionary was the written law to control the black slaves. That's why it's called Black's Law. So, yeah, so that's kind of
really is that what it was called? That I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just found that out recently, but it's, you know, like I have access to one that's pretty old, so I can go in and look up things that, you know, they don't have anymore, and you know, they've added other weird words and stuff like that. So I like it because it's really helpful, because it's really hard to get your hands on old, you know, language, you know, even English language and how it was used, especially legally.
Right. I also wanted to mention that, well, maybe this goes more in another section, but well, there's other ways that legal writing has been perverted to where we're not going to be able to understand it. And I have very little knowledge of this, but there are many people who are expert at it. It's called parsed syntax, and you probably know more about it than I do, but it's just kind of, it's also called dog Latin. It's some kind of a way that what you're reading probably means the opposite of what you think you're reading, even if you're applying standard American English to it.
Yeah, I think I like Mark Christopher. He's pretty interesting on YouTube. I watch a lot of his stuff, and basically, if it's not used in the syntax way, then it means no. So all the things that you think are yes, it's a go, it's a green light, it's good, are everything that means no, it's blocked. You're not going to get it. You have no chance. And just changing how the syntax is with the words and the language, you know, changes it from. It's kind of weird because there was this book that I read called Babylonia's Bankers by Joseph Farrell, and he talks a lot about how all of this, you know, language goes back to energy, right? It goes back to energy. It's all words and definitions to define energy, use of energy, and all these other things. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, our regular type language, or how we would use it, non-syntax, is, you know, not going to manifest us, because the way we're using it is no, 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 no. But you change its form a little bit into like the syntax way, and then you make it a yes. And so you think about like how crazy that could be, that how different the energy is of the usage of the language. And then I think a lot about Sanskrit, Arabic, and what was the other, Aramaic, that these are languages, and a lot of the native people in the United States have the same thing, where a lot of my teachers say that their language is a sing-songy language, right? And so it's activating the energy field and putting light into it. That's why they call Sanskrit and Arabic and Aramaic, you know, languages of light, because when they're spoken properly, they activate energy fields in the air and the water. Same with the native people. That's why they do the ceremonies and the songs that they do, is to activate the energy fields around them. So, I mean, if we think about it, I know that kind of takes it way crazy, but I think about, you know, what am I activating by how am I communicating, and what am I saying? I think about that a lot. And, not so much like new agey manifesty, affirmations and all that stuff. I don't go there, but, being more active about, using language as an energy helper versus, an energy work against me, kind of a phenomenon.
Right, right. Then I wanted to, it sort of eases into the next topic about how best we learn, we try and reclaim our true history.
Yeah, and just real quick, that's what the class is on, Reclaim by Reassembling. So people are looking for that on COE-LLC. That's the blog that was put out for it, Reclaim by Reassembly. And that'll be the blog that we'll put links on after blog for the class. So yeah, the third part is our history may be best reclaimed by reassembling it through the legal history. But go ahead, you're on.
Yes, I wanted to also mention that our the U.S. Congress, bribe takers though they are, and not our real elected representatives, have admitted, and this is in Public Law 97-280, that the supreme law of the land is the law of God. And probably referring to the Judeo-Christian God of the Holy Bible more than anything else. Although I think the concept is broad enough to include, not referring to what Congress's intent was, but the concept of the law of God being supreme over common law, which is supreme over the Constitution, which is supreme over corporate bylaws and so forth. One of the troublesome books in the Bible, and there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that many of us as Christians have and truth seekers have trouble with, and I'll just mention one of them, and that's in Romans 13. A lot of people are inclined to say that God has commanded us. It says in the King James Version, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God." Okay, the powers that be are ordained of God. Now, that is taken to mean that if we have government, it isn't there except that God ordained it. I don't think so. And it's not just that I don't think so. It's actually there, and I won't take it apart. I did it one time, and I think I posted it on my Facebook once, where someone actually went into the Greek translation, or the translation from the Greek, I forget which, and that's not what we have in the King James Version is not true to the original. Okay, the original did not say that all existing governments are there because they were ordained of God. It isn't what the original scripture said. It said that they should be of God. Big difference. And I know that that's an obstacle for a lot of Christians, is that particular section. As a matter of fact, that particular section is being used by the handlers of the ministers of some mega churches who are deathly afraid of losing their 501c3 status, and are told that their job is to basically keep their flocks dumbed down and following orders when the FEMA truck rolls through. Let's keep this orderly. And they are told to remind their flock about Romans. And I think there's another one, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, but guess what? We, the people, are Caesar. So, I don't want to leave, this broadcast without saying that sovereignty is everything, and it's part of the victimization. It's part of communication, and if you don't get that part straight, that as a member of the body politic of us the people, that you're not going to understand your proper relationship with the people that are calling themselves your government, who are claiming to be of God or whatever they're claiming. They're certainly claiming that they're sovereign. Every time we stand up because a black-robed one walks into the room, we are acknowledging non-verbally that he's got sovereignty over us. He does not.
And anybody who wears a uniform, right? Anybody who wears a uniform, right? So you could have law enforcement that wears a uniform and they have like a star badge, right? Mm-hmm. They doctors, like to have their little doctor coat on, their uniform. When you go in the hospital, you know who they are and who you are. You go into a court, in some countries they still wear wigs, which is a pretty good indication. I've gone to the Canadian Parliament and they still dress the same way they did in colonial times with the wig. But yeah, you make a point that doesn't matter what they wear or what kind of oath that they've taken, that you are the authority in your own life. You
not
are
just in your own life, but we the people are the source of law, and that's also found. It's been found in the enabling clause of the second Constitution, the one that we're used to using. We the people do hereby ordain and establish. Ordaining and establishing are words of a sovereign. And the 10th Amendment also sets out that, there's certain enumerated powers of the states and of the federal entity, and those that are not specifically delegated to them belong to the people. And that's being interpreted to mean belongs to the people as expressed by their elected representatives, the bribe takers. That's not the case. That I don't believe that that's the intention of the founding documents, but it's not the nature of the common law. Certainly, the common law, the law of any particular case is what the people who are charged with deciding that case by consent are understand the law to be, and they need to. Their decisions will get better and better the more that they are informed by the ancient maxims and the Bible, the principles of the Bible. Our Constitution, I think about 60-some% of it comes from Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, and comes from admissions from their own, from the corporate system's own case law, and I do use corporate case law from time to time, not because it's authority for anything. I don't recognize it as authority at all, but it's just an example of where they've admitted to something. They don't. If what they admit, if they have an opinion, I don't cite their opinion in the Dred Scott case, because that was just flat out wrong. That was unlawful. Everything they do is unlawful, even when they agree with me. But we have to use their. We can effectively. We don't have to. We can effectively use their decisions. Just as an example, look, they even admitted this. Not that what they say is sovereign. It isn't. It isn't. It's just another example of they've already admitted this and this. And that's part of why the common law is just so much simpler than what we've been taught about the statutory law. You've heard the maxim, everybody is charged with knowing the law. That makes sense if you're talking about common law. It does not make sense if it's applied to the 10,000 pages of the IRS code. It just doesn't.
Well, I think it's the same thing with medicine. I always go back to medicine because it's how I've kind of really understood common law, and because that's kind of like where I'm at with the whole thing. But it says the same thing. There's how many people? What was it? Hippocrates said, "Physician, heal thyself." Right? You are the physician. You need to be the knower of yourself, right? Your body and your intake of whatever else and your environment, and have a relationship with it and have a relationship with your creator. So your creator can help you, or your God can help you, with nothing in between you and your creator or your God. So same thing in medicine, heal yourself. And I think, one time I heard that the reason why they created 911, that you could call or dial for emergency, because numerology wise, it bypasses God. So if you have the 9, which is the end of the cycle, God would be the 10, and then 11 would be the next section of numerology. And so by doing 911, they've actually eliminated God from your equation. So now when you have an emergency, you call them, not, get in touch with your God, right? Or creator. So a lot of this has been intentional, that they've moved themselves in, even magically, legally, medically, into a position where they've become your God and your authority. And that's where you have to free yourself from that and reconnect to your God, your creator, and start working with that energy and listening to your inner voice, because it's going to tell you, it's if you're living by your moral compass, you're connected to your God or your creator, that's going to help you to make decisions that are right, for you, which will be right for everyone else. But you have to listen to your moral compass. And if you feel like you're going against your moral compass, you probably are. You're probably being led somewhere you don't want to be, and you don't want to go, and you don't want to do. So just be really careful when you hit that moment to take in a lot of information and consideration, so that you don't harm yourself and disconnect your relationship to your creator or your God in the process, because you really need that inner knowing, you need that inner seeing, you need that inner hearing in order to move forward as a fully connected and ignited being.
This is the concept of equity, which goes with common law, the sense of righteousness of a position or not. And they say wherever equity says one thing and common law says something else, equity should prevail. And I tend to trust people who, there's been a lot of propaganda out there about the so-called sovereign citizens. First of all, the phrase has been, it's been demonized by Southern Poverty Law Center, which is, part of the cabal. But citizen in their world, certain words that they have co-opted, citizen, person, resident, individual, some of these terms, they think they own them, and they own the special meaning of them, that they don't really tell us what that is. Their statutes are written for persons, so that's why they tell you, never admit to being a person. That sounds crazy to most people, and I don't know that there's a good reason to, just because they say a person means a corporate entity that we control, and if you admit to being a person, therefore you've submitted to our control. I think that's nonsense. I think we are higher than that, and our sovereignty is higher, and we can use whatever language we feel like, with the proviso that we define the terms because we are the sovereigns. But I think it's certainly safer if we act as the sovereigns that we are, as a body with knowledge, as a body that has educated itself, at least on scripture and the Constitution and common law maxims. And I think, without everything else in common law, if you've harmed me, you've committed a trespass against me. That's all you need to know about common law, really. It's just simple. It's what's right and what's wrong. And I think most of us have inside of us, that God consciousness of what is right and what is wrong in a given situation. And we can be called upon to make decisions. I don't think we necessarily need to enact legislation per se at all. Now, if we get together, I don't know, maybe we can do so, but I do want to see us get into more decentralized solutions and be working for those in our local communities, in our local counties where we have the most knowledge and power. I think
and common law courts are about the people.
Exactly.
And it's about the people, coming together. And it's about, I think the same thing. Russell Means, before he passed, for like 5 years before he passed, started, producing videos. Russell Means is really well known Native activist. He was like in The Last of the Mohicans. He was an amazing Lakota man. And so the last years of his life, he spent educating people. And he said, like, the original Constitution of the United States is Lakota law, and that it's based on Lakota law. And so he had like a legal school there on the reservation, and was teaching people about. And at one point, I believe it was their reservation that they opened up as a sovereign nation, but they had some problems with it because a lot of the people that went there were kind of user oriented. So they just wanted to go there to do nothing, not participate as a community. And I think they ended up having to kind of shut it down to that. Common law, native law, natural law, these are about, a community, people coming together, that, if you're in question for any reason, you get a chance to represent yourself against that person, and in front of a jury of your peers, which means that the elders and the people of your community come out to listen to both sides and be your peers, weigh in on what they think about the situation. And so if you think about it, the only reason that you would need law and for people to come together in a legal setting is if somebody did something to another person, or to say, for example, you accidentally were drunk and you ran into your neighbor's house. Well, obviously you're the one that's done the act, so you are going to be shown in front of a jury of your peers, and both sides are going to be talked about the guy who got his house run into and you who ran into his house. And a lot of this stuff will be discussed, but it's also about a process of healing for each person. And it's also for the community to decide, how you are supposed to, pay back, your accident, right? Your misdeed, and whether you pay for the house to be fixed, or you actually go over there and you rebuild the house for the person, or you work in their business to work off the amount of money. It's endless what the community can produce in order to solve its problems, right, and its issues. And the main thing about it is that when you don't do what's right by your community in a period, then with your peers, then that's when they ask you to leave the community, right? You've done something, and you don't want to do right by it, and you don't want to, heal the situation basically by participating in what's asked of you in order to do that. So usually that's when the community can say, you're no longer a part of the community anymore, because, we can't really trust you. You're not really, have a desire to, work and operate in this community.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big promise that reestablishing our common law courts offers is the voice of the community, and it probably won't be a perfect solution. And I think to the degree that the people involved in any dispute work beforehand on creating their own solution, knowing that the voice of the community will be the last word as the sovereigns they are, that will provide an incentive for people to come to the common law court with a solution, at least, halfway decided upon by themselves. And so I do urge people to be working on that, and I'm seeing common law courts and study groups and assemblies and grand jury proceedings popping up all over the place. What I don't see so much of, and is concerning, I think you and I discussed this a little bit earlier, is we haven't emerged in large enough numbers yet to provide the protection for that common law court that common law court needs. The Second Amendment and common law protect the right of a community to be protected by whether you call it a committee of safety, which is what the original committees were called during Revolutionary War days, a sheriff posse. And by the way, our sheriffs are corporate employees. They are not. They regularly violate their oaths of office if they even bother to take them anymore. We're talking about these offices are empty. We need to repopulate them. And this is a duty we all have to save our own lives. This is not a business opportunity for somebody, although certainly there are people in the common law movement who see it as a business opportunity. But we are going to have to protect our common law courts because the fake statutory courts want to maintain their monopolistic power on so-called justice, which has become nothing but injustice and cruelty.
Well, and also too, I think, like I'm kind of a builder, I'm a builder person, builder personality. One of the things too is I remember having a lot of people have issues with Anna, Judge Anna, but I've known her since 2010. She's super helped me against all the legal nightmare stuff that I, had to endure with several other people that helped. But one of the things, like she was saying, it's super hard to have common law structure if you don't own the land that you put the building on. That's the difference, like, in why Alaska has a really great common law court is because somebody paid the money, $1 million, and had the building built. So it's owned, right? So the other thing too is that, we need people to come forward to actually give land away for the greater purpose of the people of that community. And then the people get involved in building the building so that the outside protect, it's probably not the right word, but we're in our own jurisdiction on our own land. Anna says one of the biggest problems is that when you don't own that land, that's when, a lot of these government agencies can be sent in and, cause problems because, they kind of own the land and own the jurisdiction or know somebody who owns the land that you're renting the building from, and that those people can be thwarted as well. So we also need people in communities that has a corner lot, or it doesn't have to be that big, that you want to put this land in a alloidial, with an alloidial title to create a common law court, so that then the building, and so that it can operate for the greater good of the community. We really need that because that's the ground level, right? We need the foundation of the safety, right, and the jurisdiction.
I wanted to comment on that, though, in the context of where we are at the present time. I think at the present time, I mean, I have my I have a child advocacy organization I'm the director of, and we own a building in downtown Chillicothe, Ohio, which was, by the way, the first capital of Ohio. And we've been thinking about having that house a first common law court in Ohio, a first since, the 1800s anyway. But my concern would be the building would be destroyed. And so and the same deal with any other building that was acquired for that purpose. I believe that times are such now that we would have to have basically a common law courts in exile, pretty much, because the buildings we should be occupying, the ones we're paying for, our county courthouses, those are ours. Yeah, we should be occupying those, but we can't do that safely today.
No, well, now with martial law and the military kind of activated, you can't really be occupying unless, it was your own space, kind of a situation. But I mean, it's a lot to think about. I mean, there's so many. The reason why, I brought Kathrine on is so that, we can talk about this, right? And throw out some stuff, and then other people, can think about it, and everybody can start doing their piece of the puzzle, right? This is a big puzzle, and it's a lot to think about, and who has what pieces of the puzzle that you could start integrating into your, local areas and your communities, and reaching out to other people and getting them done, right? Because, there's no place for us to reassemble if there isn't any place to assemble, right?
We can assemble in cyberspace, and that is being done. There are a number of common law courts that are virtual courts.
Well, that's what the International Common Law Court has done, is with Sasha Stone and that movement, is that now, because of the lockdown, now they've got a YouTube channel going, and they've got a lot of other stuff going where they're, working on educating the public, and they have a lot of amazing people involved on that court. So now they're meeting kind of more in public in cyberspace than they were before. So it's kind of, it's kind of exciting to see, because we are kind of more of a global community, and what's going on in the U.S. is the same thing that's going on in every other country.
To be online does not necessarily mean that you have to establish yourself as an international court. An international court, by the way, can mean a court located in the continental United States that interfaces and that would be given, its judgments would be given full faith and credit in any other tribunal or court in any of the other states. Remember, at one time, the states were considered, and may still be considered, nation states, republics in and of themselves. So another state is still referred to, even in the corporate literature, as being a foreign state. Oklahoma and Texas are foreign to one another because each is considered a republic in and of itself, and was certainly at the time of the creation of the Constitution. But for safety now, until we can reclaim our courthouses that were stolen from us, I think it would be safer, and establish a well-organized, and I'll just use the M word, a well-organized militia. This is the term, not posse, not committee of safety. The term militia is the one that is used in the Second Amendment, and it is entitled to protection. And it doesn't mean that the governor of the state, the corporate governor, organizes it. No, this is a people's organization. So be careful, folks, as you look toward any prefabbed militias in your state. What are they really? Who are they really accountable to? And because the military also is corporate. So yeah, we got a lot of work to do, and we got to consider our safety and the safety of what we're going to be building, because whatever we build, we know that the ones in charge like to tear down. They're good at destruction.
Yeah. So go ahead and give us your email again one more time.
Okay, that's KSHINE@WLJAradio.net. And I can send you, if you're going to post this lesson online, I can do a reply, and I can put my email on there, and I can also link.
I'll put it on just send it to me with any other links that you think about in the next couple of days. And then what I'll do is I'll put a complimentary blog with all the links on my website that goes with the video of what we talked about today. So that way people can go down the rabbit hole if they need to go a little bit further.
Okay. All right. That sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and appreciate the conversation. And it's been Carrying Stones and Digging Holes weekly online class. We have it Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 1 p.m. Pacific. And sometimes I'm just on, or sometimes I have other people on coming to collaborate. So this is what I'm transitioning from my radio show into, is more of an education base. So anyway, so look for more. And thanks, Kathrine, Hine, for coming on. And thanks for people watching it. And we'll talk to everybody a little bit later. Thanks so much.
Okay. Night.